Today is Saturday, the 11th of April, and we see the fuel protests are continuing at the moment with the desire to end the carbon tax and all the other affiliated taxes that punish the use of fossil fuels in our current civilization as they attempt to move us to an all electric system. So, what would be so bad if we had an all electric system, all electric cars, all houses with heat pumps, etc.? The first problem is it means everybody would be subject to rationing at the flick of a switch or the click of a mouse, just as a digital ID and a digital currency can be used as a form of surveillance and a means of locking those people out of the economy who do not acquiesce to current political and social ideologies. So I've titled this Free Energy and the Age of Aquarius because there are always layers upon layers and wheels within wheels, and there's always rabbit holes to go down and endless information for people to get lost in. As it can feel that when you need a 3-hour video or a 10-hour video to understand a subject, you are on one level actually programming your mind with new ideologies. And what we see, of course, with green energy and climate change is a death cult in tumultuous throes of recognition and transformation. So we're in this very weird situation, and we're trying to get like an eagle's eye view, the strategic view of the map, because otherwise you're looking at day-to-day reports and endless information and then discussions on those information, which fuels all these YouTube channels and people talking about Ukraine and Iran, etc. Endless day-to-day analysis, giving people a job and something to do, but it just makes us all a victim of circumstances and always reacting. Because when you're reacting, you're not acting and creating your life. Just as people who are protesting come to the realization that when you're reacting to government and globalist diktats, you're always in a losing position. To win a war, you have to make the government react against your choices and initiatives and information warfare. So when you pull the eagle eye all the way back, you come into contact with grand archetypal energies. And in that sense, we can understand we're moving into the age of Aquarius. Are we already there? Are we in transition? What's the date? That's all things people debate and isn't essential to understand at the moment. So the age of Pisces represents the last 2,000 years. And I get interrupted again. Hang on. As every day, of course, is Day of the Cat. So Pisces, the last 2,000 years, represented by symbol of fish, and Jesus Christ representing the fisher of men's souls. etc. So Aquarius here, the nice picture from Britannica, a manuscript from, I think, medieval Germany. So we're moving into this grand transition, and people can be very dismissive of astrology because they think of it in terms of horoscopes in newspapers, etc. And it's often said, millionaires don't believe in astrology, but billionaires do. So a lot of things can seem like a lot of sort of Dungeons and Dragons style nonsense and fantasy. But it's important to understand that we want to get a picture of what the parasites that be think about and how they view the world, regardless of how we may personally dismiss these strange, arcane, esoteric, and alchemical ideas. So Aquarius represents humanity moving into a new age of intelligence, innovation, technology, and freedom. So it seems like we're in this historical moment. We're lucky or unlucky to be born in this historical moment where all that was settled at the end of World War II is now gradually being torn down and replaced with a new multipolar world order. And in that sense, the parasites that be, the so-called elites and ruling class, I think what they would like is they see this grand transformation happening, and they essentially want to lock down humanity's potential for the next 2,000 years to control that transition and to use technology to remove all free will from human beings. And their greatest fantasy is to rule over a planet of 500 million people with everything else operated by AI and robots. Because the grand cosmic and archetypal transformation of this transition into the age of Aquarius represents an opening portal of human freedom and unlimited free energy. So the dialectic at the moment is fossil fuels versus renewable fuel. So whenever you're presented with a dialectic like left wing and right wing politics or anything else, any other subject that gets debated, the truth is often found in the third option that nobody talks about. It seems renewables are just a means of dismantling Western civilization and Western culture and moving organic human beings into a state of surveillance and the merger of man with machine. I mean, imagine a world where normies have all their ideas of culture and society directly downloaded. I mean, it's funny because all the, I suppose you could call it soft propaganda, works very well, but they still want ultimate control. And why is that? Because they reject God, the divine, and nature. They view themselves as God and are essentially engaged in a grand cosmic war against God. So they want to lock us all down for the next 2,000 years to control this transition. And with the protests over fuel, which are, justified, this can also be used as a weapon against us, because it convinces people of the need to move everything to electricity. It encourages people to think we need nuclear power on this beautiful island of ours. Of course, Germany had previously closed down all its nuclear power stations and then has lost its cheap supply of oil and gas from Russia. So it was in a state of deindustrialization, which of course the far left embraces because they have these murderous fantasies of the Khmer Rouge being played out again while they manipulate the emotions of people who see the truth of pollution, but pollution is used to manipulate us further into a control grid, because human beings are easily convinced by emotional arguments, and the system plays our nervous system like a piano. But what they would like to do is play our entire natural, organic, electromagnetic system. So that transition is happening. That's playing out. These left-right dynamics play out on the political, cultural, and economic stage. So, is free energy a reality? Now, okay, on the hedge, this story pops up. Okay, I'm not a fan of Rogan. I don't usually watch his stuff. I'm just using this to illustrate the point that this story is in the alternative press about all these scientists and military people who are disappearing recently. 9th scientist tied to NASA secret ceases to exist. So this is a story you can look into. You can look at this article yourself. As ever, it's always worth reading through the comment section on the hedge, because you will find comments and links to articles and videos that you won't find anywhere else on the net. Yes, it's true that there are also lots of bots on the hedge and people with axes to grind, and Russians and Iranians and Ukrainians and Brits and everyone else arguing their point. But it's one of the very few places where you get uncensored, mostly uncensored comments. So, but this article illustrates something odd going on in the background. Okay, people are disappearing. One possibility is it could be like the Carrie Mullis situation, where Carrie Mullis ceased to exist just before the outbreak of the sniffles, and he was the man who invented the PCR test. So if he had been alive during the whole magical theater of sniffles, he would have been an extremely vocal and legitimate critic of Fauci and everything that unfolded. So coincidentally, he ceased to exist just before all that happened. So is this the same scenario where we have experts in their field disappearing before something happens? What could happen? One option is to be like the blue beam scenario of holographic aliens arriving. Would some of these people speak out against that? I don't know. It's a possibility. Another possibility is, are they faking their death because a meteorite is about to arrive? Don't know. Possibility. I wouldn't look to, politicians or celebrities suddenly disappearing from public view for something about to happen, because as the sniffles demonstrated, these people are much lower down the totem pole than they themselves realized, as we see from all the famous people who have ceased to exist before their time. And then another possibility is the whole free energy scenario, where they're sitting on the free energy technology and may have done so for many years. Because this seems like a parallel to how it seems to be the case that there has been many cures for cancer known to science for decades, but instead they inflict the grotesque cruelty of chemotherapy on people who trust the white-coated technocratic priests of allopathic medicine, who are engaged in vast profit-making on behalf of the parasites that be, and have broken their oath as being members of the human family in exchange for profit, wealth, and a digital halo around their head. So free energy would completely remove huge sectors of our society, industry, political influence who currently hold power. And that's another reason why I think they want total surveillance, because you can't go into these more radical technologies without knowing who everybody is and what exactly they're doing at all times, because individuals could have the power of AI on their laptop that would have the capacity to overthrow governments, and would have the capacity to create weapons in their basement that would be spectacular and cause chaos and overthrow governments. So it seems part of the demolition of the old world is to gradually take us into a new world where we're totally surveyed and monitored, because these technologies are so disruptive to the current economic, industrial, political, military, academic paradigm we exist within. And for those things to come into existence would completely liberate humanity and grant us those grand archetypal energies of the new age of Aquarius, which we seem destined for. So we're in this weird transition moment. And it's what the remote viewers were predicting that I previously referenced, about them saying war in Iran would draw in the world powers, create chaos for several years, and then we would move into this new system. So the next 2 years, I suppose you could say, the run up to 2030, because it's strange how we have the Agenda 2030 date existing at that point for us all to be locked into the 15-minute city, and a society where if you protested against any future government policy, you would be locked out of the financial system. So, I mean, the depth of that has to be understood by anybody engaged in protest now, that you're in a historic moment where if you get a few cents off fuel and go back to sleep and go back to your jobs and go back to your life and go back to watching TV and football, that they're always edging you towards a cliff, to get you to a point where it becomes impossible to rebel. And if people did rebel, you would never hear about it. And you would never know what was real on the news. So it's clear AI at the moment is in some kind of race. It's like the nuclear arms race of the 20th century, that there is some race going on in the background between America and China about AI, about controlling it. And ultimately, the greatest fear of the parasites that be is that this AI falls into the hands of ordinary people and all is revealed, all the dirty secrets come out, and all the suppressed technologies are released. To me, that has to be, well, what can you say? Except it's easy to imagine that something along these lines is playing out in the background while what we watch on the stage is a drama that absorbs all our attention. And my point isn't to convince people not to protest, but one has to look at the possibility that their energy is being, or can be used and harnessed to usher in this all electric system, which would be a prison society. If you want to get into the weeds of all that stuff, breakaway civilizations and the free energy, and you can go and watch endless hours and hours and hours of Dark Journalist. If you want to get into that stuff, you can read these articles, read the comments, follow the links. It's hard to sit through Joe Rogan interviews. But this is the archetypal cosmic promise to humanity to become free and technology to be mastered to give us that freedom. It's the third thing. It's the third option. It's the silent option that's always present when presented with a dialectic, such as fossil fuel versus renewable fuel. The third thing is always there, present in the background, that we are asleep to. There is always the third option. But it's there for the individual to realize. It's something groups can't realize or comprehend. They can only move in seasonal tides of the moon that eats their energy. But human beings are meant to be more than food for the moon. They're meant to be part of these grand cosmic processes, as above, so below, as within, so without, as we are microcosms of the macrocosm, that the universe can be understood by understanding yourself. And to know thyself means not to be manipulated, and to understand when presented with information, you're always being presented with a story and a narrative that neatly makes sense of the world for you. But there's always more than meets the eye. How things play out in terms of politics and economics in the next year, I don't know. But we can see that any crisis will always be taken advantage of. You know, Bolsheviks came to power in Russia when a people's revolution had overthrown the government, and the Bolsheviks seized power with violence and then controlled that society for the next 80 years uh, by using extreme violence. And there was that window of opportunity when they first came to power that they were a tiny, tiny number of people. But the ordinary society living in normalcy, bias, didn't understand the historical moment they were in, that they could prevent all the horror that would unfold if they acted at that time. So we don't know what the world will look like by 2030. When people live week to week and struggle to pay for fuel and food and electricity bills, they exist in this temporal limit. The longest people can imagine planning into the future is a summer holiday, while the architects of the pyramid imagine decades and centuries into the future, which is why you can read 1984, A Brave New World, and be amazed at predictions, because they're not predictions, but revelations of the method and ideas placed into the slipstream of human consciousness, so we're not so shocked when they happen because we recognize these things from books and movies. While if you didn't have that preparation, they'd be more likely to be completely rejected as alien and intrusive concepts to the way of life they've lived and understood. So in the end, to be happy and healthy in this long dark night of Western civilization, you want to stop looking at your phone, you want to read books, you want to eat organic food, you want a clean source of water, you want to live in a house that has a chimney and a stove, you want to talk to good people, you want to laugh at the absurdities, laugh at the propaganda, to find joy in the mysteries, to walk in natural places, and turn off the soap opera of the news and the daily briefing of casualty figures from Eastern Europe and the Middle East, and to proclaim that you have a sovereign God-given right to remain organic and to have free will that nobody can take away from you, because it is the ultimate cosmic gift of this existence and dimension of reality we find ourselves in. And to go along to get along is to remain fast asleep in a dream that's prepared you from primary school to secondary school to college and university to accept your place as a cog in the technocratic machine as you experience a well-worn path laid out for you from birth, marriage, and death. The truth when you wake up is you realize you can move in any direction because you are a dynamic expression of nature, which is always growing, changing, and can move in any direction at any moment. And that is the ultimate truth. You belong to no man and to no government. And the ultimate fiction and absurdity of our present living conditions is to accept the idea that any other human being has any authority over you. And in that sense, I would align with anarchists. Human beings naturally need community, but you need community that comes together freely and can freely exchange ideas, not engage in ideological narratives and warfare. Because all ideologies are projections upon the natural world rather than experiences of the depth of it, which is why people in modern life are so shallow, because they're all lost gazing in the mirror and the reflected image of narcissists. People look at skin color, not the soul. You have to judge every person individually. Groups do nothing but lower the IQ. To a very low and average level. Genius arrives from the dynamic interaction of the individual. So we go on with as much time as we have and only live in the present moment, because our presence and who we give it to is the greatest gift